Come on, bud. Wow. Look at that river. There are a lot of water types here. This is gonna be fun. Chetco, this is gonna be real fun, buddy. You know, a lot of people give cutthroat trout a bad rap, saying that they're stupid because basically they'll eat just about any fly you throw to them. But what I found in a lot of the surveying that I've done for the Forest Service is that cutthroat are really one of the most intelligent salmonids that I've ever found, because they'll adapt to the water types so intimately that they can survive for, well, so far around 14 to 15,000 years around this area in the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River. And what we're gonna find today is we're gonna find our cutthroat adapting to the choppy water, like this riffle right in front of me. They're gonna feed differently here than they are in the flat water, like in this run down below. So watch carefully and let's learn together and see how cutthroat trout adapt to their habitat. Where'd they go, Chetco? Come on, buddy. Fast currents, what happens is they're very protected in here. They don't feel threat from predators, and their food floats by them very quickly. So they feel protected, and they feel like they're gonna be starving if they don't feed right away. So oftentimes, they don't think about hitting a fly so much, and you get a very instant reaction. So what we'll find a lot of times in this riffle water, where cutthroat are often found, are aggressively feeding fish. This drift right here, you can feel it. Oh yeah. Oftentimes the younger fish are more aggressive and think less about eating than the bigger ones. Very often you're gonna be starving. Another reason really just to be an aggressive feeder if you're a cutthroat trout. Hammered it. Losing its grip on the water surface is a beautiful Westslope cutthroat. A really brief look, that was just a little guy, 6 or 7 inches in this smaller pocket water where our juvenile fish are gonna be. Two things, there's more juveniles, they're hungrier, more competition, and they're in this fast, choppy water where they feel super secure. So they're gonna feed aggressively before the other guy can get the little bit of food. And they flop around quite a bit. So we got in our first Westslope cutthroat, feeding aggressively in choppy, quick water. Chetco, there might be more out there. Let's go take a look. Little guy missed it. Feeding aggressively. Maybe on this one. Right, ow! Missed my dropper. Man, these fast currents make the fish hit hard and make me miss quite a bit. Gotta grease the joints here. There we go. I was actually going to cast. This little feller found me. You can see here, this is a juvenile cutty compared to Chetco's head. A little minnow. This is a sign of successful reproduction in the North Fork system, which is a great change from what it was even 30 years ago. There's been a lot of changes to improve this previously degraded habitat to where you will find in the substandard habitat, these faster and smaller pools, there's more juveniles, higher population density, more aggression, harder feeding, and they're gonna feed on just about anything that floats by them. And we're gonna find a lot of that in these pocket pools here on the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene. Let's go see what else is out there. Let's work in the pockets. Every little swirl of current could possibly be holding a feeding cutty. There we go. Another juvenile, this one in the surface. Got this pocket water in this riffle, and it's full of reproduction. Signs that this North Fork system is still improving, whether you're feeding in the surface or feeding down below on nymphs. This pocket water is a great spot for cover. Beautiful, healthy trout. Someday, we'll overtake the system, but for now, they're finding protection in pocket water. All right, I've worked this pocket out pretty well. Caught the couple of juveniles that were in there, hiding out from the competition of other individuals, as well as some of the bigger fish. I'm gonna move out into this faster water and see if I can't find some different individuals, maybe even feeding them just a little bit different. This is a rather stiff current I'm in. Oh, whoop, push me back. I'm leaning into it hard just because I want to get a better downstream drift, quartering away from me so that my fly is still hitting the lane that I want to fish, where the fish are hanging up to feed, but I'm able to get a better, longer drift. There we go. Right out in that fast water. It took a perfect presentation and a little adventurous wading. But I did find in that fast water a fish that just hammered my dropper, which is a soft tackle, which kind of looks like an emerging insect. What I found out in those heavier currents was slightly bigger fish. This is a different year class than those smaller couple of them. They are bright and beautiful, and this one's getting, that's sexually mature. Just big enough and smart enough, hanging out in that fast water to actually reproduce. This one will, next spring, be fat and full of eggs. I've worked my way downstream, down into this flat. It's almost pool-like, but not quite, because the water's still moving at a decent clip, but it's very flat and it's deep, so the fish can hold deeper, and with the slow currents, they're gonna get a good look at everything drifting by to make sure that what they eat is a realistic imitation, or actually, preferably the real deal if you're a fish. I'm gonna need to go back and put on something a little bit more realistic for these fish that are hanging in exposed flat water. These are tough fish. These are cutthroat, and these are intelligent fish. When they see these rocks tumbling through the water and they see little filaments, little legs sticking out and wiggling, they know it's an insect and they're gonna eat it because they know this is a great food source in these sterile granitic systems. You can see all these rocks are granite. Very sterile water. You're not seeing moss, you're not seeing lichens really. There's just a little bit of algae on these rocks, and the algae is what the caddis are eating, and these caddis are what the trout are eating. Caddis have a varied life cycle that's quite exciting as a fly tyer and as a fly angler, because there's a whole lot of different parts of that life cycle that are available as food items to the trout. And what I'm finding here is that in this flat water, it's not the adult with the feathery wings. I'm gonna have to go to the larva or pupa just below the surface. It really does make it difficult to fool these cutthroat that have learned to be very detailed in what they select to eat in flat water. But I am getting them subsurface. Just gotta take subsurface. Soon, I'll have a fish on a caddis, juvenile caddis, not the adult. There's a pod. Things are changing up now. Yeah, that's different. That's nose to tail rising. This isn't pupa action anymore. We've got a different situation. Let's see if we can figure this one out. Checker, what do you think they're eating? What do you think they're eating? There we go. Ha! I don't care what this fish is. I have worked tirelessly. There's one bug that they've been eating, and I have a couple different ones on, and it didn't take the one that I thought was actually hatching. It didn't take the caddis. It didn't even take an aquatic insect. It took an ant. I put on a terrestrial pattern, something big, fat, and meaty, and this beautiful, incredibly finicky, fat Westslope cutty took a flying ant pattern. A flying ant is the answer. When all signs were pointing to caddis, I did put on that caddis dry because that's what it seemed like that was the rising pattern, but it was something that crawls on logs and rocks and sometimes falls into the water. What it really eats. An opportunistic feeder, even in this flat, finicky water, something as big and gaudy as an ant pattern can fool them in flat water. Unbelievable surprise. A very good surprise. Can you do that? But you can't. Oh, yeah, you did a little bit better than I did. Cutthroat trout are generally in smaller river systems. The Coeur d'Alene River system is a big one, especially for cutthroat, but say small to medium waters, like this stretch of the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene. And I oftentimes will fish a 5-weight. And in this case today I chose about an 8.5 foot 5-weight fiberglass rod. It's just roughed out really. I just wanted to test the length and the spigot ferrule design on this, which works really well. Didn't finish it out, just kind of got the guides on there, and it did really turn out to be a nice casting rod. So today I get to fish it and see if it is kind of the all-around tool that the 5-weight's known for. Big enough to throw some heavy stuff if I need to, throw some weight, and also flexible enough to be enjoyable when you hook like the little 6 to 8 inch cutthroat that are very typical in a lot of cutthroat streams. So 5-weight glass rod, it's 8.5 feet, it's long enough to reach out and mend, and it really is a good all-purpose tool for most cutthroat streams. Look to the 5, some cases maybe the 4, but 4 and 5-weight rod. think this one will be a good one. Custom made in my shop in Montana. I can make you one just like it, if you ask nicely. The shadow can really affect how a fish is gonna react, especially in the heat of the summer like this, when there's not a cloud in the sky. And the shadow, you can feel the solar radiation in the sun, and as soon as I get into the shade, it just disappears and it's nice and cool. So I'm going to expect these fish to react a little differently. They should be a little bit more secure in their feeding habits than the fish out in that flat, this bright sunshine in the flat water. Those are tough fish. In the shade, in the flat water, they're not gonna be the easiest fish because of the flat water, but because of the cover of the shade and the cooler temperatures, they may be a little bit easier to pick out. There, eat it, eat it, eat it. Now this is about the 8th two-fly combination that I've switched to. And I've done everything from dry dropper rigs to, and I've imitated everything from caddis to mayflies to stoneflies to ants. And they're being so picky that I just have to keep switching my patterns out just to basically give them something different to look at. So I'm going back to black ant, and now we're going to also an elk-hair caddis, kind of a flittering insect. I'm gonna put them together and hopefully bring them up. One of these has to work. There we go. Down deep. Was working the edge of the shadows and actually got into the sunlight, but instead of shallow, dark water, I got bright, deep water. Went down with my nymph again and managed to fool a beautiful cutthroat trout. Wow. This is what I think of when I think of North Fork Coeur d'Alene River Cutties. This is an impressive specimen. Oh, and it was down deep in moving water, moving fast water that most people know cutthroat in, but it was deep. I really did have to get down to get out of those juvenile fish habitat areas and find us some beautiful, mature, fat, and healthy cutthroat trout. Look at that fella. That is a beautiful fish if I've ever seen one. Just long and gorgeous and colorful. You can see that arc of spots on its belly. Very typical of a Westslope cutthroat. It's just survived despite development and roads and campgrounds and erosion and gold mining and copper mining and silver mining and logging and more roads. And anglers like ourselves, we really can get along well if we respect what's around us and appreciate the habitats that they live in, from flat water to rough water. Let them have it and we can have the fish and beautiful places and copper bracelets. An angler fishing the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River today is really gonna have to look kind of hard to see the signs from the past damages for more than 100 years of really extractive use. But it was a little bit overdone enough to where it eliminated most of the trout and loaded up the whole channel with sediment. I like to think that as long as we're mindful of what we do and that we do our best to keep the vegetation intact and to keep the river flowing freely like it was meant to in the channel, that we can really reestablish this place and keep it amazingly beautiful. We can keep this river a healthy system and we can keep catching native cutthroat. There's a feisty trout. This one was a little bit closer to the surface. And an adult for sure, but A little bigger than the ones we were seeing in that kind of subdominant, well, the subpar, I suppose, habitat. A little healthier. This one's moving out into some bigger water. Beautiful Westslope cutthroat. A little bit of a belly on it. Took a hot bead, just kind of generic nymph. And it's ready to go right back into the water. Get a little bigger. Bigger water, bigger fish. It is usually typical that the bigger pools are taken over by the biggest fish, pushing the smaller ones off into the subpar or not quite as good habitat. And I got that one a little bit closer to the surface than generally where you find the bigger ones. The bigger ones love the deep stuff. Chetco, it's been a good day, bud. We found fish to be very difficult when given the chance. In that shallow, flat, bright water, even in that dark water, it was kind of tough when it was flat, huh? And it really does go to prove that cutthroat, like any trout, when given the chance and the right habitat, will be selective. They can be more selective than a brownie, or at least about the same. But it was a great look at a river, its habitat, and how the fish adapt to where they hold in the water, rather than us just assigning a name like cutthroat are dumb. They are not dumb at all. And they live in beautiful places like the North Fork of the Coeur River. And if you're lucky enough to catch them on a custom-made rod, fiberglass, graphite, or bamboo, but glass actually was a really fun rod to fish today. It's just could be a wonderful experience when you look at the whole system and think about how the fish can adapt and to give them credit for how they have adapted to their habitat. Chetco, I think we should head on down river and go see if we can find some more well-adapted trouts. All right, well, hey, make sure you tell them to check our Facebook page so they can see more pictures of you rolling around in the dirt or just laying there. Or Facebook, more fish pictures. All right, you can just stay there. I'm gonna go fishing. Oh, good boy.